Welcome back to another edition of the Pack Edge, where we discuss the latest trends in packaging and processing. We're here today with Jorge Izquierdo and Tom Egan of PMMI, the Association for Packaging and Processing Technologies, to talk about supply chain uncertainty and what companies can do to overcome persistent issues with supply chains. Jorge, Tom, thank you so much for being here today. To begin, are you seeing some of the bottlenecks in raw materials and transportation starting to improve?
Well, Liz, I guess it depends on the industry, on the supply chain. I can tell that specifically in the packaging industry, when you talk about materials, we're still suffering significant delays because of supply chain. A good example would be aluminum cans, some specific films, plastics, that we're struggling with. And it's not just the materials, it's also affecting the side of the automation. When you're talking about automation components, where there's a delay on one single component that it's preventing for you running a new equipment, a new line, and somehow delaying the investments. So what this is causing is that CPGs are now being forced to allocate and start earlier with their investment process.
We often hear this called the new normal. And if this disruption is here to stay, even in the short term, what can companies do?
It's a good question, Liz. We've heard from both the suppliers and from the purchasers of the equipment that there's probably three areas. Number one, communicate. It is an element that is so central to having to understand what it is that is happening in the supply chain and how it may impact what is an expected shipment and expected delivery. The second one is for the companies to investigate alternative suppliers, and in the case of the CPGs, the consumer packaged goods firms, to also investigate alternative materials. Now, that's not necessarily an element that happens in one day or 1 week, but it does allow you to investigate some flexibility. And the third one is to be flexible with your production line. Running a production line with the product that you can based upon the availability of the packaging materials and the product is still a benefit to get the end product out into the retailer.
So how can companies be more flexible with their lines, and why does that help?
So I have a great example where both the OEM and the customer collaborated on what was a real need. The holdup was what's called an HMI screen, a human machine interface, the operator screen basically on a particular product that an OEM was delivering. They could not get their standard size screen, but they had a smaller one, a 7-inch screen. So they built a template that allowed the use of the 7-inch screen. It's a little bit tougher for the operator, but it allowed the machine to ship. Then what they committed to is to go back when they have received the 10-inch operator screen and replace that. The software is the same, the connections are the same, it's just a matter of having that bigger interface. That was probably a great example. That communication piece that I mentioned is number one. The biggest element, in some cases, companies are communicating more than once a day. Not once a week, more than once a day. Hey, here's our morning update. We think we're doing well. Here's the afternoon update. We did get the shipment in. We're now ready to finish the machine and begin to send that. Or if it's not a part of the machine, it's the material that's going out. And here's the shipping that we're going to use, because there are even times where the type of shipping you're going to use can have an impact on how quickly it's reaching you. Those are probably two good examples of what the OEMs and the customers can do in terms of working in the supply chain to try and help alleviate the disruptions that you're seeing.
Jorge, Tom just mentioned about improving communication with suppliers. Can you tell us how that factors in?
Sure. I mean, it's early on we were talking about materials and components. I think when you are forced to use a new material because of that's what's available, you need to get in communication not just with the supplier of the material, but also with the supplier of the equipment. and make sure that both can coordinate and understand, develop the right settings for a machine to run, right? It's different products, different material, different settings, and communicate these to the manufacturer of the product. And keep in mind that very likely these adjustments are going to have an effect on the productivity of your packaging line.
Well, Jorge, Tom, thank you so much for sharing your insights today. If you'd like to learn more, be sure to visit pmmi.org to see our latest business intelligence reports. And don't forget to visit packexpointernational.com to register for Pack Expo International. It's coming up on October 23rd through 26th in Chicago, and we'll have all kinds of resources and information about addressing supply chain issues and much more. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.